Good afternoon and welcome to Samurai 50. It's Friday again and time just flies. It feels like I was just here yesterday, but it was last Friday. So on Samurai 50, on this platform, our intent is to bring you inspiring individuals and really motivating people, successful people of all kinds, all types of businesses, all sizes of businesses, and all types of people. So I'm really thrilled to bring to you today to Samurai 50 Dr. Saira, and we had a chat this morning, and I'm really excited about this interview. I'm excited about all our interviews because I get to know people and so many different things. And I had a great chat with you this morning, Dr. Saira, so I'm excited to bring you on. And just to note too, for all of our viewers, this is recast on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and on YouTube, so we can find this there if that's your preferred platform. So welcome to the show, to the program, Dr. Saira. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one. And so Dr. Saira is the owner and creator of Dragonfly Wellness Center. And this is a really, really important industry, a really important thing that Dr. Saira is doing in the world. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the pandemic. We're going to talk about all things that are happening in our world right now and with us all and with each of our individual businesses. So why don't you, let's start there. Why don't you tell us about Dragonfly Wellness, what it is exactly you do?
So I started with just being a therapist and helping people individually. And with the center, the beauty is that it's not just me. So we have a group of women, they're all women right now, who offer therapy, counseling, crisis management, support groups. There's different things we offer. The vision for it when we first launched on March 1st, 2020, was to yep, that's when we launched right before the lockdown, was to eventually grow it. So we have massage therapists and a chiropractor and acupuncturist. We have the wellness is not just, because most wellness centers are physical wellness based, and then they'll throw in a counselor for good luck, right? And so we wanted to flip the model and have it mostly a mental health wellness place and then add those other components. So that was the vision. And so now it's an online space and we haven't been able to do the body stuff because of the limitations for now.
Okay. Okay, great. So it is, that's interesting that you're flipping that model because, and you decided to make that flip before we had a pandemic. And, here we are. So a big need for this in everything that we're all dealing with right now in terms of mental health, mental wellness, right? So tell us about the name Dragonfly. That was interesting.
Okay, the name Dragonfly. So Dragonfly comes, there's a long, beautiful story around dragonflies. They've kind of been kind of a spiritual marker for me since I was in my early 20s. The dragonfly in some First Nations communities means transformation. So you know how their wings go really fast, and any particular second the wing looks like a different color, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what the dragonfly means to me is about being with people in the exact moment they're in, right? Whatever that wing is, like, we're with them now.
Mm-hmm.
And who they're going to be in the future or who they were in the past is less important than what's happening right now. And so the logo of our Dragonfly Wellness Center, I actually have it tattooed on my back, and so does my sister, and so does my brother. It started as the tattoo, and it grew to this idea of how could we be with each other really present as we are today, instead of living in the past or living in the future, but being here now with people.
Wow. I just got the shivers, honestly. And look, I'm wearing a fur collar here. I literally just got the shivers as you described that moment and that color for that dragonfly. And I've never heard it quite described that way. That's really cool. And then you and your siblings having that connection as well. Really great. So tell me what this practice looked like for you as you started to think about opening on March 1st. And then we'll get into where we are now. But what was that like for you, the idea? How did that start for you and when?
So I would say it started many, many years ago when I was just kind of launching my little private practice with my little shingle myself. And I kind of went through these phases and stages in my business. And I felt like I was finally at the place where I could be in a really public space. And I was spending enough time at work. Like, I had enough clients, I had enough things kind of rolling in. And so I was at the point of expansion. So it's like I talked to my therapists in my practice about the difference between being the lone wolf in business versus part of the wolf pack, right? So I got to that critical point where I couldn't be the lone wolf anymore. I needed a pack. And so that year before that, I had been building and building and building. And then I got to that point where I said, okay, I need to bring another therapist into my practice. Like, I can't handle the volume, and there's pieces, right? Because there's some people who specialize in families or in trauma or in chronic pain or these different areas that aren't my specialty. Most people come to me because they're looking to incorporate their spiritual beliefs and their cultural values into therapy. So that's my specialty. And I work with depression, anxiety, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know everything. And so that was the idea that, okay, now that I've kind of established myself as a single, so what is it? Single proprietary, whatever. Let me grow. So that was the idea, that the launch, right? So I'd already had people kind of working in the space, and then we were and it was funny because I have a girlfriend that makes these incredible cupcakes, and she said, "Can I make some cupcakes for the launch?" And I said, "No, can we wait? Like, let's do a year and then do a launch." And she's like, "Okay." And luckily, because 2 weeks later we were all shut down, right? And so I'm so glad we didn't do this like a big thing and then have to, yeah. So we're still waiting to do the launch, but
yeah,
that's how it affected us. Like, we had to really quickly pivot and figure out what's a different way of doing this business that's still going to be effective and still going to help people, but also be kind of according to the regulations that are now here.
Right. Within 2 weeks, yay, brand new business launch. Here we go. Incredible.
Yeah.
So then I know that in the space, the telehealth space, things moved quite quickly, but there are lots of regulations and lots of things that you had to adhere to, never mind your own business survival.
Right.
So how did you navigate through all of that when it was like day one? None of us knew what we were dealing with.
Right.
So what did that look like for you at the beginning there?
Well, I think in the beginning, those first 2 weeks when we were all locked down, I'll be honest, I just took a break. I was like, let's just hang out with my family for about 10 days. And then I started getting the calls from clients, like, how are we going to do this? And many people couldn't afford to pay suddenly because, right, their work is unsure. And so what are they going to do? And so what I started to do is I started making these YouTube videos. So like every couple of days, I'd put out a video on YouTube and these little teaching videos, so people were still connecting. And I was kind of offering these check-in calls, like these complimentary check-in calls. And so trying to do as much as we could for people to kind of hold and support them until we figured it out. And then we kind of landed on a platform that was, regulated by the health authorities, and, the encryption was there and all of that. And then we were able to kind of do our online sessions.
Which was relatively quick. Like, I will say that industry, as you were essential services, you had to, and which is good. And you were kind of forced to figure this out very, very quickly. So talk a little bit about the specific services that you offer your clients. So when we talked earlier, you said you had some group, and so tell us exactly what your services are.
Sure. So individual counseling is the one that most people would be familiar with. So that's one-to-one with a therapist, and we have a group of therapists, and you can kind of pick your specialty person. And the groups, I find, are really, really important during the pandemic because people are missing social contact. Well, we all are, right? And meaningful, it's hard to have like deep, meaningful relationships on a screen. Like, we're not used to doing that. And so to kind of reimagine what that could be like in creating online groups. So we offer the groups, we offer individual counseling. And then there's also the piece around corporate wellness, where we're looking at what's happening within businesses, right? So what's happening not just with your individual health as an employee, but the entire business as a system. Like, how's it doing from a mental health perspective? And so that's another service that we offer.
Interesting. And are you, you pivoted very quickly, and you sort of had to get on board with technology that you probably weren't used to. So even though you launched March 1st, the pandemic and all of the changes that came along with that sort of forced you into something that you may not have gone down that road at that time. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, because I had been working with clients online anyway, but really like like just a little bit of peppering, right? One or two, because maybe they're traveling or maybe they've moved and they want to keep working together. So I was using, whatever platforms for that, but they were not necessarily, again, up to regulation. And so luckily the platform that I was using quickly got their act together. They were actually planning on launching about 8 months after they actually launched. So there was some, there were some bugs and whatever, we worked it out, but they launched this online platform. And so learning that it wasn't a steep learning curve. It's not about the technology. It's more about how to do the job on the
Okay.
other side of a screen, right? How do we, so there's our professional associations have been putting out workshops on like burnout on a screen, like how to read body language from the neck down if you can't see them, and like all of these things that we all got in our training, but now don't necessarily apply in the same way when we're doing it this way. So we had to kind of relearn a little bit of that.
Learning curve on both sides, you as a professional to do your job, learning curve in the process, and then your clients now having to go through a huge learning curve. Okay, this is how I'm going to do this now.
Right.
And I mean, I can imagine in a field like yours, the intimacy of one-on-one, or in, like you say, the body language would be so key.
And the
Um,
space, right? Like we take an entire course on how to create a welcoming, warm, supportive physical space. And, for clients to get that drive and then to sit down in a physical space and then to drive home and to kind of have that as an event, that's part of the therapeutic process. So if you don't have that, then we have to, and you're kind of getting off the call and making, stepping into the next room where your kids are, like it's a little bit of a different, so we've had to do different things to open and close sessions and just to help people bracket that experience of therapy outside of the rest of the world. And same with our groups, like, put on your headphones if you have other people around, because we need confidentiality, right? So things like that we've had to, and they're little things, but if you don't think about them, they become big things.
Yeah, sure. And then the comfort level of the client knowing that you've got this, you've got to handle this, you have to have that bit part of the composure and the professionalism of what you do as well. Meanwhile, you're literally figuring it out as you go, and your kids are calling you from the other room just like they are,
right? Yeah.
On there. Yeah. So did you have this vision for where you are now? Did you have this vision for your business years ago, and what has that looked like over the years as an evolution to where you are now?
So when I first started, I graduated, I had my degree and I had my credentials, and my husband and I moved into this beautiful house and I had an office space in the house, and we set it all up and we had a big launch and I started seeing clients, and then I got pregnant. And then I had morning sickness every day for 10 months. So it was, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it anymore. It was just like, I was not capable or able to do the work that I don't, and especially in counseling, because like you said, our demeanor, our self-care, all of that is so critical, because in a room with a client, it can't be about me, right? It really needs to be about them. And so I had to kind of take a step back for while I was pregnant, and then the baby came, and then my priorities really changed, right? I wanted to be there with him. I wanted to kind of have that experience. Then when he got to about 2, I started to like try again, like had a little, we lived in a different place, but we still had our little, home office, and people would come, and it was stops and starts. That's the best way I can explain it, right? Over that period of probably 10 years, there was a lot of stops and starts and stops and starts. And I was frustrated, to be honest, because I felt like I had this potential, but I couldn't do both at the same time. It's like I had to finish doing this. And when my daughter launched into kindergarten, that's when there was a complete change. Like, it's like I got the brain space and the time to suddenly go for it, like put in all my heart into it. And so that was kind of my journey. I wish I could say it was like, oh, this is how I visioned it and this is where I ended up, but it wasn't like that at all. It was, and the center, that's not even something I even considered until I was starting to get too busy.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Well, it never is, Saira. It never is that perfect. Here's exactly how it's going to go. Not that I've ever come across anyway, and
Right.
and things change and shift in our, I like that you use the word priorities. Your priorities shifted for a period of time. And sometimes in there, people will lose sight of the vision or the passion and the goal. And it's a roller coaster, and you're just ever evolving and ever changing. But now then you say, after your daughter's in kindergarten, now you can see it and it looked different than
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think it has to do with identity, right? Because I always had that, I had an identity as a student for the longest time, and then I had an identity as a therapist. And suddenly when I became a mother, that identity was like overshadowing everything else. And so I've had to, over the last 3 years, really learn how to have both, be a mother and a therapist and a group facilitator and all of that, but not feel resentful either way, right?
yeah.
Not feel resentful of my work because it's taking me away, and not feel resentful of my family, but be able to hold both. That's been a change in me that had to happen to be able to hold both. Because before that, I just wanted to be a business person. I just wanted to make my money and do my thing. And
Yeah.
that totally, when I saw that little baby, oh man, it all changed. It
Yeah.
all changed.
When you saw that little baby, well, that's
Well,
over.
that's over.
Now.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I guess that's over for a while.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, there was a part of me that was really upset about that and frustrated about that, right? And wanting it to be different than that. And I think I told you this morning about, there was a point where my son was 5 and my daughter was a baby, like 1 or something. And I had rented this tiny little like rent by the hour office space, right? So I would only pay for the hours that I used it. And the babysitter would have to like come right to the lobby and like quickly take the stroller and the kids before the client comes so that I still look professional, right?
Right.
But it was like, I was just so frazzled, but I'm like, I'm not giving up. I'm going to do, even if it's just like 1 client a week, I'm going to do something. And so I think keeping my like baby toe in helped with that identity piece, and not losing that passion and that dream that I had of building something eventually.
Yeah. Right. And sort of talking yourself out of it gradually, and it's okay.
Right.
Keeping your toe in, yeah, allows you to still have that vision, even that light at the end of the tunnel, even though so small. So, and thank goodness you did. I mean, what you do now is more important than ever, what we're all going through. So with that in mind, and the pandemic and all the changes, and you had to go online, you're busier than ever.
Yeah.
Busier than ever as a result of what we're all dealing with, both, so you've had to deal with all of that, both professionally and personally. You've had some big changes
Mm-hmm.
in your life as a result, somewhat to do with the pandemic. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think what you're talking about is our big move. So we used to live in Vancouver and Surrey, particularly, and then the pandemic hit, and I was really engaged in the community. So I'd be going to the gym. I was part of the Parent Teacher Association. I was really active in my faith community. Like I'm an extrovert, and I was out there in the world a lot. My days were very full. I always had people over, so people and things and busy. That was my life. And then the pandemic hit, and suddenly it got really, really, really quiet, right? And at first I was really uncomfortable with that. But the more quiet, the more kind of I settled into that quiet, the more I started looking again at our new priorities, right?
Mhm.
I was getting to spend time with my kids and not be rushing them to some activity. I was getting to spend time with my husband and not just talking about logistics because we'd hardly see each other, right? And all those things I thought I needed, I didn't.
Mm.
And I realized like really all I need are these, my hubby and the kids, as long as we're all in a good space, and our home. Like really that's it. And so we decided to move. We've actually now live in the middle of the mountains near Shuswap Lake. There's the mountain. I can see it out the window, and like the lake's right there. And it was our retirement plan that one day when we're old, we'll like sit on the balcony and have a barbecue and look at the lake, and we're living the retirement plan now. And I was joking with my husband about that the other day, that it's kind of like we're retired people. And he's like, yeah, except that you still have to get up to go to work. But when it doesn't feel like work, it feels like a holiday, right? It feels like every day is this beautiful holiday, because my work doesn't feel like a job. It feels like a calling. And so it's easy to get up and do whatever needs to be done and still feel like I'm retired. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
100% makes
Yeah.
sense. And I mean, good for you for doing it, because a lot of people will have that sentiment or that thought, me included, and don't pull the trigger. So you probably wouldn't have without the pandemic and
No.
everything that happened there. You would.
At least not until like 30 years from now, right? We wouldn't have done it now. And I think, and it was one of those things I noticed with my husband and I, when we decide on something, when we really get on the same page, things move fast. So we decided like the minute we decided, our house sold 2 weeks after we listed it.
Oh.
Yeah. And then we were like in a new city by a month later. Like we were
Very fast.
it
Wow.
just happened. And so so I know when things happen like that so easily for me, I kind of feel like, oh, it's meant to be, right? It's just
Yeah.
it's part of the path. And I'll be honest, like being out here and in this community, like the pace of life and the values, and it's just a totally different feeling. It reminds me of when growing up, right, in the 80s in Calgary, like that kind of that
Yeah.
warm community feeling that's here that hasn't been lost because of the big city and all the busyness. So
Yeah.
feels
And I
good.
mean, let's face it, in terms of where you're living, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world in BC. When it's beautiful in BC, there's no place quite like it. So good for you. It's very inspiring to hear that you've done that at such a young age and such a pivotal point in your, professional career, and you're doing it.
Doing it. And we're homeschooling on top of that. So we're homeschooling, running a business, like doing it all. And somehow it's all working so far.
Yeah, well, that's just it. Somehow it's working
It's
because
working. Yeah.
yeah, you make the plan and your life falls into place. It often does. So let's shift gears a bit because we're 20 minutes in and there's so much more I wanted to talk to you about. And this is a big gear shift. But we talked about this real quick this morning. You have done not one but two TED Talks. Incredible. So tell us about your TED Talks.
So the first one, the topic is around inner demons, right? And how we carry around these inner demons. And it's kind of hard to admit that they're there, but once we admit that they're there, we can actually start dealing with them. And that's, I mean, in a nutshell, that's what therapy is, right? Is being willing to admit that there's a problem and then having a guide to help you through that valley. Because, I always say to my clients, like, don't do this at home because it's not, the best example is, between when you go to a dentist, you go to a dentist for a root canal. You don't try to do a root canal at home, right? You can brush your teeth. You should do that thing. But the root canal part, please see a dentist. And so when people are in that space of actually acknowledging that there's a demon here, like, come see us. And I tell it, the first TED Talk was really through a story about my childhood and the monsters that our parents pretended were there and kind of how they terrorized us with the monsters and then how that like fits into my life. So that's the first one. The second one, so the first one was really about the inside. The second one was more about the connection to other. And that was called People Matter More Than Things. And it was really a plea, I would say, to people to like put down your phones and put down your screens and look at each other, right? Look at each other, because we know in therapy that because the damage happened in relationship, the healing also has to happen in relationship, right? And so when we can actually show up for each other, and it doesn't have to be as a therapist or a clinician, like just showing up for each other in our families, there's room then to heal things. Otherwise, we're just missing each other. So that's the second one was about that.
Incredible. And we can find, for those of you that don't know, most of you probably do, we can find TED Talks on YouTube. So we will put links below here once we're off the live to all of the resources that we're going to talk about here today. And I, for one, am going to watch both of your TED Talks because both of those topics are just so interesting and intriguing and timely. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I'm going to watch those this weekend. And I know TED Talks it's a big deal. And I know a few people that have done one. I don't know anybody that's done two. So that's pretty incredible.
And you know the story. So it was one of those things that I put on my like wish list. You know how you make those wish lists for your career, like all the things, like I want to be on Oprah and I want to do this and a TED Talk, and like I just written it down on a list of what I'd love to do. This 100 things in my career, and then it happened, and it happened like it was handed to me on a silver platter. There was actually a cancellation, and so they reached out to me.
Oh,
Like
wow.
I was requested. I didn't even apply to do the TED Talk because usually you have to go through a process
Yeah.
and apply and train and blah blah blah. I was
Mhm.
requested. Like the person asked me, and I was like, "What?" Like it took me a while to even
Sure.
believe like it wasn't a prank or something like that. This is actually happening.
Yeah.
And that moment, like stepping onto that TED stage, I just felt like it was just such a beautiful moment in my. It felt like the pinnacle, right, of everything that had happened. But then what happened after that? About a month later, I went into this vicious downward spiral of a depressive episode for 2 years.
Oh,
And
wow.
part of that was the second TED Talk. So when you watch the second TED Talk, you'll see how I present, but I was really struggling with extreme anxiety, extreme depression, suicidal thoughts in that second TED Talk. And so I'll give you a hint. There's one place where there's this long pause. And it's supposed to be this like long pregnant pause. No, I just had forgotten my speech. On stage at TED, like I'd forgotten it. And so yeah, see if you can find it when you're watching.
Oh,
You
I
think,
will.
oh, this is that moment where she forgot her speech, right?
Roll it.
And what was interesting for me about the two was how different I felt in each experience, right? In the first one, I was at my best self, and in the second one, I was hanging on by a thread.
Mhm.
But I saw that I'm able to perform even though I was hanging on by a thread. And thank God for my family and friends who just supported me and patted me during that time, because I couldn't have got through on my own for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's right. And we talked about that this morning in detail too, relative to a different question, but let's talk about that support and that community and how important that is now more than ever. It looks different. The community, the village, the support looks different because we're physical distanced, but talk about how important that is for all of us and what we're dealing with now.
There's a new field that's emerging in science called relational neurobiology. And what they're
Mhm.
looking at is how being in the physical space with another actually changes our brain chemistry.
Mhm.
And so, have you ever had that experience where somebody's like in a really grumpy mood and you walk into the room and you know something's like it feels off, like it just feels weird? Yeah, that's because we're sending messages to each other all the time about how we're doing. And so, we're not getting that face to face anymore. We can get it through voice. So, it's great to have like actually talk on the phone or do some sort of face this way. But we need those clues to let us know that we're okay, right? We
Mhm.
need to see the herd and that the herd's okay for us to know that we're okay, because we're social mammals. That's how we're designed, as in our brains. And so there's different ways that people are getting engaged in community. I've seen people do like games night with their friends, right? Where everybody does games night. The groups that we're running through Dragonfly is really important. So there's a couple. There's one for women with anxiety and depression. There's another group for people from the LGBTQ community for support there. We're thinking about launching an addiction support group for family members who have people in it, because people who are in addictions right now, again, like things are so different, but the disease is still there, right? The illnesses are still there. And so how families are coping through
Mhm.
has to change. And it's like things like, even things like support group meetings, like 12-step meetings or whatever, they're trying to meet online, and we are getting something out of that. It's not nothing, but it's not what we really need.
Right.
And so even things like walking, remember at the beginning of the pandemic when you'd walk in your neighborhood and people would actually look at each other and
Mhm.
smile at each other because we were like, we're all in this together. And
Mhm.
we've kind of moved away from that. Like we've gone back to the no eye contact and the, nervous looking. And so that's something that we're thinking about as a family and as a business, is how do we stay connected to people in the way that we were always meant to, right? That the way we lived before was actually dysfunctional with all of us doing our little thing. And so how do we bring back some of that community, that connection? Doesn't mean you have to know everybody or know their story. It just means you have to feel like you're part of something, and even your neighborhood, right? That you're part of a collective, a group.
Yeah, amazing. So the groups that you're referring to, Saira, are those free to join, or do they have to have a service with you, or how do those work?
So those groups are drop-in, so people can drop in, like they can come once or they can come 20 times. There is a small fee, like $10 or $15, not a lot. Yeah. And if
Well,
there's any sort of financial issue with that, there's subsidies. Like money should not stop anybody from joining our groups. And there's an education component, there's a group discussion component, there's a support component. So even if people want to just come and kind of check it out and they don't want to say much the first time, that's totally fine.
mhm.
To kind of see if this is a good place that they want to land as far as joining community, especially, and I'll say it again, especially for people who struggle with depression and anxiety, group support is so critical right now. And so if there's anyone listening who's doing that, like feel free. I think, could we put a link about how to join for that? Yeah, we'll do
We
something like
sure
that.
can. And that's why I'm asking, because we will put a link for sure. So I'll message you after just to get that
Sure.
exact link. But this is great for people to know that this is a resource available. And it's because the community is so important and support is so important. And you often can't get that in your household. People just can't, and they need to seek it. And here you have these fantastic groups going for minimal cost, and dip your toe in and see if this is something that, makes sense for you, and see where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge believer in support and community and collaboration and lifting each other up as a means of moving forward and helping to heal, or just like you say, we're connected beings,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to know that we're together, and we're starting to feel a different sense of isolation this last round. From what I can tell, it's
Mm-hmm.
quite different than the
People
first.
are like holding on by their fingernails now because it's like enough already. Enough. The brain can only take so much emergency activation, right? We can't do it. So, and that's why people are breaking the rules because they're like, I can't do it anymore. Right? It's hard, but please, everybody, please still follow the rules. But I understand. I understand.
Yeah, that's right. Follow the rules, but we get it. I
Mm-hmm.
understand as well how people are just, like you just said, had enough.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely had enough. I mean, this is going to pass. We are going to come out of this. So, using all of these resources and tools now as we're in it,
Mm-hmm.
imagine how well you'll be doing and how much better you'll be feeling and how more equipped you'll be when it does pass and this kind of dark cloud is lifted and we can all dive back into the lives that we, want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, some of those lives aren't, maybe we don't want to go back to what we had. We are,
I'm like,
right?
yeah, I would want to leave that life behind. But that's it. I think a lot of people are doing the self-reflection of like, what is important to me? What do I really value? And does my life demonstrate that? And if it doesn't, what changes do I need to make so that my life actually demonstrates what's important to me?
Right. And how can I do that now? How can I use this
Wow, right.
now to set yourself up for that life and that success, on the other side of all of this? So that's really great. I'm happy to that we talked about that and that we'll list these resources. So let's talk a little bit about, the entrepreneurial journey. What do you see in all of your years of experience and what we're dealing with now? What would you see would be a common mistake or a big mistake that people and businesses make?
I think the number one mistake that I've witnessed and that I made at the beginning was trying to do it alone and competing, right? Seeing
Mhm.
others in my industry as competition. Because when others in my industry are competition, I'm going to hide, I'm not going to share, I'm just going to keep it close. When I started realizing that actually, again, that community piece, that social piece, and that collaboration piece
Yeah.
is important to me as a value, actually things took off for me from a
Mhm.
business perspective. So I was telling you this morning about how I would have these little get-togethers, right? This is
Mhm.
pre-COVID, but little get-togethers at my house with other therapists. So if I'd met someone at some networking thing or whatever, and I found out that we were in the same field, either some sort of mental health professional, I would invite them and their partner and their kids and whoever they're connected to, and we would have dinner. And we wouldn't talk about business. We would just have dinner together. And so these groups started growing. I think at our most we had something like maybe 8 of us or 10 of us. I think there's a group of now about 17 women who were part of that, and they would come on different. And building that kind of hub of professionals was really helpful because now I can refer. This is before the Dragonfly Wellness Center thing started. I needed to be able to send people to other people. Like I don't do couples counseling, for example, and so we'd have to send someone to somebody else. And now I know those people and I trust those people and I'm referring to them and I'm helping them promote their classes and they're helping me promote my classes and groups. And so there's this collaboration that happens, and it's that mindset, that abundance mindset, right? Like there's more than enough for all of us. So let's just do this together. I think that's the number one mistake, is thinking you're in this alone and that you have all this competition. That would
Mhm.
be the one.
Yeah, love that. And I 100% agree with you. There is more than enough to go around, and what comes around goes around,
Mhm.
and you're going to receive just, if you get, give, and you'll receive, and you're certainly proof of that theory working, right? So this is my favorite question to ask people.
Okay.
So what do you love most about what you do?
The thing I love most is sitting with a person in front of a screen or in a room and watching the change. right?
Mhm.
So that could happen in a moment in a session, or that can happen from the beginning, like the first time that they sat with me to their graduation session, and seeing how right in front of my eyes this incredible transformation takes place. And I like the neuroscience of it. So I like knowing that, like, oh, their fiber tracks are changing in their brain and they're more in their this part of their brain. And I can kind of do that from a head perspective. But when I see like their relationships changing, their self-esteem changing, their goals and changing, they're getting back in touch with their true values, they're getting back in touch with their deepest like calling and deepest wishes, and stop kind of being in the race or being in the, you know, the drama, but able to step forward and make choices in their lives. That's the part for me that's the most fulfilling part of my work.
Mhm.
Absolutely, is what is being with people. I think of it as, you know, walking in the valley with them, right? Being in the valley with people in the darkness and helping them see by moonlight. Like that is my favorite part of the work.
That's your superpower. Again, you just gave me the shivers. So, for someone like you that is doing this day in and day out, or on a regular basis, this is you're helping people through these times in their lives. What
Mhm.
does your self-care look like? How do you manage you in order to be able to help other people with what they're dealing with?
Yes, that is a really good question. I've noticed I did a lot more of that formal self-care when I was living in the city. So
Hmm.
I would do the gym and the spa and the massage and like those types of things that people think about when they think about self-care. What I found is now what works for me better is this concept of micro self-care. And so micro self-care means all through the day I'm doing little things to support
Hmm.
myself. So like for example, I'll show you what I've been working on. I got this from the dollar store and it's a little like coloring book, right? And I'll just in between clients, I'll just do a little bit of coloring. Or you know, I've got my making sure I'm hydrated, making sure that in between clients I'm listening to some music or giving my kids a hug or doing something to just like discharge all of that. So I'm not carrying that, because burnout is really high in our profession. It's huge and high. And when I was going through the training program, they didn't actually teach about self-care. Now they do. Now they do. Now I teach about self-care, but in the program that I went through, you know, 15, 18 years ago, it
Right.
wasn't there. And so I've had to kind of develop. So there's certain things like I make sure that there's movement, making sure there's movement every day, making sure my diet is supportive and nutritious, making sure that my relationships, that's a big one, my relationships are stable and fulfilling. And then meditation and mindfulness is another one, that just that grounding and making sure that I'm okay. And I journal a lot. Journal is the best therapist, I'm telling you. Like just writing and getting it out and just kind of having a place to dump is really important. And I see a therapist when I need to as well,
Yeah.
right? So that's the other piece of my self-care, is that I make sure that if I find myself, because I live with depression, if I find myself going there, I need to be able to reach out for help. So I guess I'm very kind of self-conscious or self-aware of my own energy levels throughout the day. I
Mhm.
don't wait till the weekend to have a rest, right? I rest throughout the day. So that's how I do it.
Yeah, really smart thing to do, and then you're on top of it. It doesn't ever, crater to the point where it's a huge climb back up. Like, I'm gonna,
Right.
go to the spa next month. Like, that's great, but,
Yeah.
the
Well, and that's what people do, right? They have like 50 weeks of work and then 2 weeks of holiday, and you're supposed to get
yeah,
all your rest in those holidays. And it's not
yeah,
how we're designed, right? We need to do and stop and do and stop and do and stop. And for years I told that to my clients, but I wasn't practicing it.
yeah,
Now that I have to teach other therapists about how to become therapists, I have to kind of walk my talk. And so,
sure.
yeah, absolutely, all through the day, little things to kind of keep me up and help me monitor. Something as simple as just looking at the blue of the sky or the gray of the sky and just seeing the vastness and just having that one little moment of awe in the middle of my day. That'll fill up my tank and I can keep going for another couple hours.
I love that. Such good advice, Dr. Saira. Really, really great insight and knowledge around your craft, and just what we're all dealing with now. So I'm super happy we had you on today. So where's your preferred method for people to reach out to you? And we will put all this information below. Where can people find you?
The best place is just go to the website, drsaira.ca. That would be, and then all the directions are on there of how to kind of get in and book your appointment and da da da. If you do get to the point where you're booking an appointment, you'll land on our scheduling page, which has all my other therapists on there as well. So if it's not me that you want to work with, that's totally like, in the field. It's really important to us that you get a match. So if I'm not necessarily the match for people, that's why I have a team, so that somebody else might be a better match. So we work with somebody else who works with kids, or there's all these different categories, right, of how people work. So yeah, you'll get a choice there of who you'd like to select to work with.
Wonderful. Well, this is one of those things where I'm happy that, that you are really, really busy for you and for your business. But then at the same time, what that reflects is that people are struggling, but it's good that this resource is available to them, resources like yours and all the therapists you have available, and that it's okay. It's okay for people to reach out. That's what we should be doing.
Yep.
So that's what I want to walk away with, that message of saying we're all in this, we are all in this together, and the resources are there. There are some great professionals like Dr. Saira here to help us through and get through to the other side, because we will, and we are going to.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure. I'm going to watch those TED Talks, and I'll even comment back after I do, and we will share this out to our community as well. So thank you so much again, and we will look forward to catching up with you again, after we're out of this on the other end, and see what life looks like then.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot. It was so great to be invited, and I look forward to next steps.
Sounds great, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Bye.